Hello my friends, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Wale O. I'm a content creator based in Germany and I make content about living abroad, moving abroad and travel. If that sounds like your cup of tea, make sure that you're subscribed to this channel. And if you are a returning subscriber, welcome back my darlings. You know I love you so much. I'm here because of you guys. Today, in today's video, we'll be talking to a Big Four executive about what it's like living in the UK versus what it's like living in the US, because not every time Germany. This channel is about all things moving abroad and living abroad and sharing other people's experiences with you guys. So I brought her on here. She'll give you guys all the tea and everything, but I'm so excited to have her on here on the channel. But before we go into the gist of the video, if you're not following me on Instagram and TikTok and you'd like to follow me, it's at Wale O Chronicles. There, I also share more concise, short tips and tricks about moving abroad, living abroad, and all that kind of jazz. And with all that being said, don't forget to subscribe to this channel if this is your cup of tea, and let's get into the video. All right. Thank you so much, Dee, for taking the time to come to this channel today and tell us your experience about living in the US versus living in the UK. But before we go into it, can you give us a background introduction about yourself? Who are you and where can we find you on the internet?
Who am I? Okay, I'm Olateru. I am a Nigerian living now in the US, and I spent 3 years living in the UK, Scotland specifically, but living in the UK. I moved there for work, came back to the US. I work for a professional services firm, and I've done that for almost 13 years now. But I also do a lot of things for fun. So I don't like to describe myself in terms of what I do, but people expect to hear that. So I say that sometimes. Sorry. But I love to travel, and I think that's what we initially connected on, just our love for travel, right? So I have a travel blog. It's called Well One Hills, and that's on Instagram, and I have a blog as well. And I created that blog when I first started traveling because I didn't see a lot of people that looked like me, but also had restricting passports like me. I didn't see a lot of people traveling and writing about it. So I created a space to be what I wish existed. And so that's why that blog and Instagram exists. I talk about travel, but also working, career, my journey from starting as an associate to being an executive, what I learned, what I've known. And then I also have a podcast where I talk about money. So travel is where I live my best life. Money is where I save so I can live my best future life. So I have a podcast where I talk about money for first and second generation immigrants. I just want to create a space where we can have these conversations and, save and invest and build wealth, because immigrants can be rich too.
Amen. Amen. I love it. I love it. I love it. How did you end up living in the US and how did you end up living in the UK? We want to hear like the story of what to these two countries.
Two places, right? Yeah. So the US was the first thing. I moved there when I was 16, and it actually is 20 years ago this month, right? So I wanted to go to university, but yes, ultimately I got a job in the US on a working visa. H-1B visa is what it's called, and I stayed there for work. And then for the UK, I always wanted to have a global career. The travel thing is in my blood. I've always wanted to do it, even when I was, as early as 6 years old, when I didn't go anywhere. The first time on a plane was to come to America to go to university. So we're not a family that went on holiday anywhere. Where, what? I always wanted to see the world. I've always been curious about the world, even when I did not have any money. When I was a student, I used to read books about traveling. I used to write down, I don't know how many lists I wrote in college. My friends know. And so I always wanted to have a global career. And so one of the reasons I wanted to work for a global firm is that I thought, I could have those opportunities. And so even from the first year I started working, I made it clear that I wanted to do a rotation abroad. And so anyway, my firm won a client in the UK in 2014. It was a big client in my specific industry. And we hadn't won a client of that size and that magnitude in my industry in the UK in a long time. And so we did not have the capacity within the UK, like from a personnel standpoint, to serve that client from an experience and all that stuff. And so they wanted to bring a number of us from the US and other parts of the world, but primarily from the US, to come help build the team and build the team and build the practice. And so there was a meeting of my boss's bosses. I was not there, but I was nominated, and somebody came to say, "Oh, are you interested in this?" And so my opportunity came to me. There are other opportunities within my firm where I could have applied, but in this case, it came to me, and that to me was a was a testimony to, being prepared, having the right experience, but also people knowing where you have an interest. And then, by God's grace, that happened. And, 6 months after the opportunity came to me, I had a few interviews and I moved to Scotland. And I said I would never live in the UK before, but never say never.
Never say never, exactly. So let's talk about like cost of living. That's one of like the favorite topics on my channel when people want to know about living somewhere. So we want to compare the cost of living in the US versus the cost of living in the UK. Specifically, we can start with accommodation, which is the most important one. And so how much did you pay for accommodation in the US? I mean, we're just doing blankets. I mean, these are big countries,
in general.
and cities are different, states are different.
Yeah, I was going to say it's going to depend.
Yeah, exactly. But just for the sake of simplicity and comparison, let's compare like how much did you pay for like accommodation, or how much can people expect to pay for accommodation in the UK versus in the US in your own experience. And then we can talk about things like transportation, groceries, utilities, and going out, leisure activities, and so on, all the things that fall into cost of living for a single.
Yeah, and I think I would have answered this question differently at different stages of my life. So when I moved to the UK, I was a manager in my career, I had worked for a few years, I was living in an apartment in the US, and then I moved to an apartment in the UK. And again, I'm not in New York, or I wasn't going to central London, but overall, I would still say that it was comparable. Housing was not cheaper for me. It was about quite similar. Scotland versus Minneapolis at the time. It was pretty close, my rent, from both places. Yeah.
I'm surprised.
Yeah. But I think if you go, for example, if someone was moving from Texas to the UK, housing will be way more expensive in the UK than Texas, for example, because Texas is a cheaper cost of living place. So I think it's because the US is so vast and there's so many, like 50 something states. So the cost of living differs from place to place. But for me, it was pretty close to the same. I went from a 1-bedroom apartment to a 1-bedroom apartment in Scotland. It was pretty close to being on par. I mean, except the council tax thing. That one, I didn't expect it. So in the UK, when you're paying rent, when you're renting an apartment, you have to pay council tax on top. That one that actually made, I don't know, it's part of their rules. So depending on the band of apartments you're living in or housing you're living in, it's almost like paying for like public utilities in a way. But I'm like, I don't own the house. Why am I the one paying? The landlord should be paying.
It's supposed to be the landlord.
Yeah. So in the UK, you pay council tax. And that was something that I learned about it like a month before I moved, but it's just a foreign thing to me, right? Because we don't have that in the US. Yeah. So in the US, well, my rent was cheap because I linked to my money side. So I moved into this apartment when I was a first-year associate, and I was renting from this couple. I was renting their 1-bedroom condo. And so they did not raise my rent for 5 years. And then in the 6th year, they raised my rent by $30. So I was paying $750 for a 1-bedroom with a garage, which was honestly, it was a good deal.
Wait, what? I'm really?
Yeah. But it was from 2009 to 2014. So that is a long time ago. And then when I moved to Scotland, I paid a little bit more, but I'm saying it's the same because if I did not get that good deal, I would have been paying more in Minneapolis, right? So it was just that this couple was just nice to me, and I was paying my rent on time, and I didn't stress them as a renter. So they kept my rent flat for 5 years.
Wow.
So now it would be about 1,200 thereabouts for a 1-bedroom. That's not, that's okay. If you want a modern 1-bedroom that's nicer, it's close to 1,750 to 2,000. So it depends if you want more luxury, but in a mid-range state in the US, not New York. New York is like 4K.
No, in New York is another country.
In a mid-range state, we're able to pay like close to 2,000 for like more luxury amenities, but 1,002 to 1,005 for like a standard 1-bed.
All right.
And in the UK at the time, I was paying about £950, which is about just over $1,000. That's why I said it was kind of close. Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about transportation. We know that public transportation does not exist in the US. Sorry.
In some states, so in Chicago and New York, there's great public transportation.
No, sorry, you cannot compare to what we talk about. What we call public transportation.
I agree.
Europe.
I agree. I agree. In general, yes. Travel in general, yes.
So let's talk about like the cost of transportation in the US and compared to, let's talk about the cost of the struggle transportation in the US.
Yes, come and shade us, please. US, let's exit the building.
I like shading on my channel. It's sweet. Okay, no, seriously, let's talk about the cost of transportation in the US. Compare it to the cost of transportation in the UK for you. Like,
well, when I was leaving the US, I sold my car because I mean, I knew Europe has just great transportation. So of course, transportation is, for me, the cost is not just the cost, it's the time and the stress, right? And so, you know, I did not own a car in the UK. I rode public transportation or took Ubers. But I mean, I think it's definitely cheaper, but also more convenient in the UK than it is in the US.
Yeah. So you would have to, in the US, you will have to talk about the cost of buying a car, the cost of insurance, the cost of the car,
and the cost of petrol, and then maintenance.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And all that was simply non-existent when you were in the US, but in the UK, you just paid, like, did you guys have like a monthly subscription, public transportation subscription fee, or you?
Yes. So I did my, you know, I just got my pass for the tram in Edinburgh, right? So you just, you know, and what the thing is, if you live in London, your tube costs can be expensive.
No, we're not talking about London, please. London is another country.
yes. If you're outside London, yes, I just got my monthly pass on the Edinburgh tram, and that was just a flat fee for the whole month. I could go anywhere around the city, which was great. And then I can even get a pass to the airports. So when I was going to and from the airports, I usually, unless I'm running late, I would just take the airports, bus to the airport, and then it was way cheaper and quite convenient. So Europe has it down when it comes to transportation. I can't even lie.
Do you remember how much you paid for the pass
I think it was about 80 or 90 pounds a month. And then I don't know, cost of car in the US. I think at the time I was paying, about $500, $400 every 6 months for car insurance. And well, if you pay every 6 months, it's cheaper than if you pay every month. So at least I would pay every 6 months to get the bulk payments. And then on top of that, you have to pay for petrol. And then on top of that, if your car breaks down, you have to pay for that and all of that stuff. So, I mean, I think Europe has it down when it comes to transport.
All right. Let's move on to like groceries and utilities. What are the costs? Like which country does better when it comes to feeding?
That's tough to do in this economy. Inflation, I don't know the cost in Europe now. Inflation has happened to everybody. My grocery budget of 3 years ago is not the same as this time. So that's tough. That's tough to compare. But I felt like at the time the monthly grocery bills were comparable. Right. I think one of the things I learned, well, the UK used to charge you if you use their bag. So I learned quickly to start that. I changed my habits in those years. I buy bags and I take my bags now to my grocery store.
Yeah.
But overall, I think it was pretty on par, cost of food and all that stuff. I didn't feel like I was paying way more or way less in either place. Now with the inflation today, I don't know, everything is expensive everywhere.
Everything is expensive now.
Yeah, but I think I was paying about $200 a month. 200 thereabouts for my groceries in the US, and about the same in the UK.
And then what about eating out? How much would you spend eating out? In which country is it more expensive or cheaper to eat out and go out?
See, I think eating out, there's not much of a difference, but the tipping culture is very different, right, between the US and the UK. So I don't go out as much. So for me, eating out has never been a big part of my budget. So I never felt the difference either way in either country. So I'll go out once a month or something, eat a meal out or have a drink and all that stuff. So it's never been a big thing for me. However, the tipping culture in general, when you do go out to eat, when you do get a taxi or an Uber, right? The first time I rode in a taxi, and the guy was like, what? I was like, oh, where's the thing to put a tip? He was like, we don't do that. And so in the US, if you enter taxi and you don't give a tip, they're like, what kind of devil are you? Even when you go out to eat, for me, when I'm making decisions about going out to eat, it's like, if I go out to eat, I'm going to make sure I tip decently, 18 to 20% is what I personally do. Because I know that, people that work at restaurants don't earn great wages, right? But in the UK, it's not really a thing. You don't have to tip anybody. And if you tip 10%, you have done wonderful.
Yes, in Germany. Like it's not compulsory to tip, but
Correct.
people only tip 10%. And the people there's minimum wage, so and the minimum wage is not bad. So people
Correct.
are kind of paid quite okay for the work they do. And then the tipping is extra. So of course it's nice if you tip, but it's not like
Correct. It's not like
as you have to tip. And 10%
correct.
usually what you should tip, or you round it up to the next or when you are tipping. That's how it is in Germany as well. So it's interesting to hear that it's kind of similar in the UK. I mean, now we can say like the European thing and the American thing.
So yeah, for me, the biggest differentiating factor in going out was not having to tip. So that made it a little cheaper for me, Sha, in my own view. But otherwise, I think again, going out in my city, mid-range city here is fine. But I think when you going out in New York, going out in Vegas, I mean, I remember when I went to Vegas almost 10 years ago, a bottle of just water, of one small bottle of water was $8. It would not even quench my thirst, was $8.
Wow.
So, I mean, when you're going out in New York and Vegas and all that stuff, next level, you know, that's, yeah.
Interesting. So I want to talk about this very interesting thing for me. I want to talk about making friends. People always say generally that making friends in the US is quite easy because the Americans are so friendly. I consider that level of friendliness to be a bit, in Germany, we consider that level of friendliness to be kind of superficial because there's no depth to it. That's how we see it. But so comparing like the ease of making friends and meeting new people in the US versus the UK, what's your experience on that?
I think it's hard anywhere you go. That's my personal opinion, that moving and building community, I think that's the toughest part of moving abroad. So I think whether you're in the US or whether you're in the UK, or whether you're in Timbuktu, I think you're going to have a period of transition that is going to be tough. I also hear that, so I don't know that US is easier, right? Because I do hear, I mean, I was talking to a French guy when I was in Europe, and he had worked in the US for a year. And he talked about how, you know, that superficial American friendliness. And I hear that, I've seen that, but I've also seen true welcoming people, right? So I've seen both sides. So yeah, I think there's a thing about people wanting to protect their circles, that I'll allow you in, but only so far. But I think I also experienced that in Europe. So I don't think it's any different. I think wherever you are, you have to kind of try to understand the culture of the place that you are. And you have to, unfortunately or fortunately, you have to try many things until you find gold, right? So I think for me, when I moved to the UK, actually making friends was quite tough. I considered leaving, right? And a lot of the friends I ended up making were through work, because I was also working a lot. So let me not be, you know, I was working a lot. So a lot of us had moved to the UK for work at the same time. So that's how I eventually built most of my friends. But those that I met outside of work were like through church and all that stuff. And, you know, for you to get the best results in any country, you have to put yourself out there. Gold. However, when you do come up with the people that, you know, are just kind of, they will invite you in, but only so far, you will know and just cut your losses and move on. And I think it's also important that we categorize not everybody is your friend. You know, some are acquaintances, and that's all it's going to be, and leave them that way. But I think for me, I would always give any place at least one full year, because anything before that, I think you're making a premature decision on whether people are friendly or not, because it just takes time. It takes time to also accept people, because somebody moves to Germany today, I go to bring them to your house that same day.
Yes, no, I'm very nice. It's not true.
No, for me, I mean, when someone reaches out to me and they're new, I understand how hard it is, so I will try. But I'll probably first have you over let's do coffee. Let's meet in a neutral place, because I want to protect my house and the energy I bring to my house. Your energy is not okay. I'm not inviting you to my house, you know. Definitely. I'll have you over for coffee and all that stuff, get to know you, just vibe. And then if it goes well, then next time maybe I'll invite you to something where I have a group of friends, so it's a big group. And then I can invite you to my home where it's one-on-one. So I think that's my answer on making friends. I don't think America was any harder. I think UK was also hard for me, but I think you have to put in the work, right? Because you cannot put in the work and expect all these best BFFs from where? Yeah.
From Instagram.
No, but Instagram does help. Instagram, okay, wait, I mean, that's off topic, but Instagram does help.
Yeah, everybody on Instagram makes it look like, oh, it's so easy to make friends. Look at me and my friend, we're so cool. But in reality, when you move countries, it's really tough to like recreate your community, your circle.
Yes.
All right. So let's talk about safety. Safety and crime in the safety as a person of color and crime in the US and in the UK. What's been your experience?
Right. So, well, the safety of the person of color, I'll answer that one last because I feel like we all know the answer to that, but okay, I will humor you. As far as crime, here's the thing. I'm answering this question from a privileged perspective, right? Because, when I was in the US, at least when I was a student, I lived in, average area, but then when I started working, I lived in, decent areas. So yes, while there are crimes in both areas, right? Maybe US has slightly more crime, more violent crimes, more gun violence than the UK. But overall, I always felt safe in either place, so places of where I've lived in. However, as a person of color, there is a weight on you, live as a Black person. There's a weight on you in America that isn't as heavy anywhere else in the world. And for me, I didn't realize that until I left America and then came back. Like even when I was in Europe, I started to realize that. And then when I came back, I was like, it's different because, I went from Nigeria, the most populous Black nation on earth. And I went to America and I went to a small town where they're like, how many Black people? And all of a sudden I became an other. And I'd never had that experience in my life. So I think America was also my first consciousness of my race. Right. And so for me, it was a very jarring movement. Right. But yes, I mean, we've seen the news. I mean, George Floyd happened in my city. That's generally progressive and all that stuff. So I think as a Black person in America, your race comes first. And it's just something that you carry and you're aware of, and you know that you have to act right. And the thing is, as a Black woman, it's even better for me than Black men, right? So I think, during George Floyd is when I was talking to my siblings, my brother talked about how, he was in New York with his friend, when they graduated college and, they were going to see another friend of theirs and they got the streets wrong. They knocked on the wrong door and a couple opened the door with a gun because they thought that they were trying to rob their house or something. And it's that thing that when people see Black people, they assume danger first, they assume the worst and don't give us the benefit of the doubt. And my brother had never shared that with me until we were debriefing all the stuff we were going through, post George Floyd. And he was like, in that moment, he said his sense was still not there because his friend first went down right away and put up his hands to show that we're harmless. My brother did not even fathom that this was happening. So he did not put his hand up or anything. His friend was like, get down and put your hand up because they could get shot. And so that's just the reality. And then I was talking to my brother-in-law and he's like, yeah, he's lived in America. He came here in 2010. He never goes running or walking in their neighborhood by himself. He had never done that. He only goes with my sister or with their child because when you're with family, you're presumed as less threatening, right? You're more received. And that's just and those are things that we don't even complain about. We just do, So yes, as a Black person, as a Black woman, there is a burden to living in America that doesn't exist elsewhere. Now, that's not to say that the UK is there's no racism in the UK. There is racism in the UK. The only explicit hate crime that has ever happened to me actually happened in the UK. What? Yes. So let's just get it all there. I was in Scotland on a road trip with my friends and colleagues from work, just doing a road trip like the year we live in Scotland. And we stopped to have lunch, and then a car stopped, and they didn't stop. They were driving past, and they just yelled the N-word at me. I was the only Black person there, and the car sped off. That happened to me in Scotland. So I think yes, America has work to do, but I think the world has work to do. I feel like I shocked you.
Yeah, I'm in shock. I'm gonna go and think about this for the rest of today because we're really breaking all the preconception and preconceived notions that I had that I thought I have, especially I've never lived in the US or the UK. So there's a lot of assumptions I came into this interview with, and I'm happy that you're debunking many of them. And this is why we do these chats and these interviews, because you think know something based on what you've seen maybe on TV or in the media, but then when you speak to people on the ground who are living the reality, they tell you something very different.
In the UK, it's more subtle. In the US, is less subtle, but it's there in both places. But in America, it's heavier. Yeah. That's the way I can explain it, you know.
What are the differences and what's the overall quality of life? Which one would you, well, before we say which one would you choose, what's the quality of life in both countries for you?
Yeah, I think hands down, UK for quality of life, right? And I think you guys have it. What I think a quality of life, you know, I think you can talk about, there's so many ways to slice this. I think a quality of life is not just money, just how rich is your life you're able to live, you know, the stress levels, you know, the safety and all of that. I think my quality of life went up when I moved to Europe because, you know, the US has such, you know, hustle culture, you know, you're trying to make it and all that stuff. And that's what we glorify. And I understand that there's time and space for that, but I think it can become all consuming in America if you allow it to be, especially in my line of work with Big Four Consulting. It's a high performance, competitive environment, and it can just control your life. And so I think when it comes to, like, you know, the time you guys take off from work, like in the UK and all that stuff, you know, it's just so much, there's life built, work is built into life and not life built into work. Yeah. Right. That's how I think about it. And when you think about life that way as a society, you have an overall better quality of life. And that's how I felt. And I think that impacted me coming back because it made me decide, okay, what am I going to accept and conform to in America versus what am I not going to? So I think for me, I'm learning that, yes, American can try to drive you in a certain way, but I can choose where I say, no, I'm not going to do all that. So I think quality of life overall is better in the UK. In the UK, it's so small. The houses are so small in Europe compared to the US, right? But I think for us in the US, we can think, oh my God, if it's not this big, it's not good enough for me. But it's like, the size of your house does not really measure the quality of your life. How much space do you actually need, you know? I think when you're traveling, right, in the US, we're used to having Wi-Fi on planes. Like, that's a basic service.
Wow, nice.
Yes, Wi-Fi on planes, WhatsApp on planes is basic. So imagine my shock when I was on the plane. I was like, even British Airways, I can't WhatsApp my family. So yeah, that doesn't exist in the UK or in Europe. And so that's quite a shock to me. Even when you're flying there, you know, in the US, the pilot welcome you on board, tell you, oh, the weather is going to be this. Okay, in 10 minutes, it might be a little choppy. And then we'll go around the weather and then we'll land. The weather is this way we are going. In the UK, you enter the plane, you just pray. When you land, you land. They will not tell you anything in the middle. They won't tell you anything. I mean, public transportation in the UK, you know, you guys they have it down. I really enjoy that part. And then settling into the UK, most apartments come furnished. That doesn't exist in America.
Oh, I'm actually surprised because this is new to me.
Yeah, most apartments in the UK come furnished. And so for you to find an unfurnished apartment is actually a lot of work. And so I shipped all my stuff over, and then I got there. It was impossible. So I ended up taking a furnished apartment, and I had to put all the extra stuff in one corner of the place because apartments mostly come furnished. And so that's just different that I didn't expect. Opening a bank account in the UK, oh my God, the hardest thing ever. Like, it's like they'll say, oh, you can't open a bank account without having a proof of UK address. But you can't get a UK apartment without having a bank account. So which circle are we going in like this? It took like it took over a month to open a bank account, you know? And then the council tax I talked about is just another bill that you should just add to your rent. Don't just look at your rent. Ask about how much is the council tax on this before you decide on your budget, because I was surprised. And, you know, simple things like, you know, in the UK, using your ATM card to get cash from the machine. In the UK, you can use your ATM card at any bank and they won't charge you. In the US, if you're trying to get cash from an ATM, only your bank will not charge you. If I use like another bank that I don't bank with, they will charge me a fee. So that was a simple convenience in the UK that I'm really happy about, right? Expect rain. Expect it will rain plenty. It will rain a lot, you know. And then simple thing like, you know, washers and dryers. In the US, we have washer, we have dryer separate. In the UK, they have their washer and they put it in the kitchen. and they don't really have dryer. And so that was a very different thing to get used to, because in the US we have our setup and it's separate and it actually dries the clothes. The dryer in the UK will not dry your clothes. You will still need a rack to hang your clothes.
It's so interesting, the little things you notice, like the little differences, because in Germany, we also do not have dryers. It's not a normal thing to have dryers. You have the washer, and then you hang your clothes wherever and like let them dry for however many days it's required for it to dry.
And then the clothes will now be rough. You now have to actually iron.
Yes.
In the US, I don't iron because I have my dry and, you know, anti-wrinkle, and the clothes come out already, you know, wrinkle free.
That's so practical. That's so practical.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, thank you so much for sharing all that you've shared so far with us on this channel. You guys, you can find her on, please tell us how we can find you on Instagram for your podcast and your Instagram page and your blog. Please tell us once again. So if people want to ask you questions about like working in the big four consulting firms in the US, the UK, internationally, or career tips, how can they find you?
Yes, so I have two platforms, so pardon me. So Well One Hills is where I live my best life and do work. So Well One Hills, Instagram is where I talk about travel and career. And then well1hills.com is my blog where I talk about all my travel, share my itinerary, but also talk about working abroad. And then for my podcast where I talk about money and life as an immigrant, it's called The Rich Immigrant Podcast, everywhere you listen to podcasts. Also on Instagram, and also there's a website, therichimmigrant.com. So find me, depending on what side of me you relate to, find me there.
Perfect. You guys, The Rich Immigrant Podcast, I live for that podcast. Like,
thank you.
We're all gonna make money.
We all gonna make it. This is a party, not I don't know if the YouTube is a party.
Yeah, the YouTube people, they are used to my like extra video on the camera. So
I love it.
All right. Thank you so much for coming to speak to us on this channel today and sharing your experience. We really appreciate it. And you guys, if you watch this video up till this point, thank you so much for watching. And I will see you in my next video. Bye.
Bye.